Hey, what's up? Hello everyone, welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl. Today we have our May Oscar predictions. We are continuing those, but now we are into the tech categories, and it seems like it's perfect time because the Dune Part 2 trailer just came out, and I have, a small hunch. We're going to have Dune Part 2 either number 1 or number 2 in probably all 4 categories we're talking about today.
I don't have it in my cinematography lineup, but I know that you do, which means let's start with your cinematography predictions, because this is one that I'm going to disagree quite strongly with you.
This year has been my year more of taking risks. Last year I took some. Did they pan out? Not entirely, but some did. And this year I want to hold more to that. So at number 1, I do have Dune Part 2. This would be a carryover win from the first, and I'm really trying to argue with myself, how many carryover wins will Dune have from 2021 here into 2023? Right now, I'm seeing like 2 or 3. I have it in cinematography, I have it in visual effects. Sound is really close, but right now I have it just off in sound. But yeah, Dune Part 2 I have at number 1 in cinematography. The trailer boasts some beautiful images. While yes, it may look similar to the first, they do show hints of when they go to some other worlds. There will be some different cinematography choices. I feel like some very interesting visuals could come out of this.
My argument against it in cinematography remains the same. It looks exactly the same as the first one. It is shot fully in IMAX, which might help a little bit. Plus, there are some black and white elements, but otherwise this is the same film that we saw the last time. It's no longer novel. It's no longer new for voters. They're going to see it and go, well, we already voted for that last time. I think it's going to be like Avatar, which got pretty close, but at the end, I think it was probably number 8, number 9 in cinematography, and that film looked gorgeous. But it just looked like more of the same from the first one, which means there were more novel, more new films for the Academy to reward.
Last year's cinematography lineup was so weird and so different. I don't know if that's going to be a new trend for this branch going forward, where they pick films that don't really correlate with the rest of the Academy's nominations. Because, we had Bardo, we had Empire of Light, we had Elvis getting a nomination here, where at that point it wasn't really in the race. We had Tar, which was a surprise nomination. We had Maverick miss. So there's a lot of question marks with this category. So maybe where we're predicting now doesn't look anything similar at the end of the year. But continuing here, I'm pretty sure my number 2 is your number 1, and that's The Color Purple. After the CinemaCon raves, at minimum, this movie's going to look good. With it being a big production here from Warner Brothers, they're going to push this out. It comes out right at the last minute, which could hurt, but also could help and be the hot new movie where it could maybe even overperform on nomination morning.
Dan Lauston also is on a hot streak right now, just coming off of John Wick.
Color Purple seems, it seems good. You know what else seems good to me? And maybe this is a category this movie could miss, because this is the early frontrunner to many, but Killers of the Flower Moon, cinematography. Not all Scorsese's movies hit in this category. When they do hit, they're very strong. Killers could be one of those safe movies all year. I know we didn't have one of those last year, but this could be like a solid number 3, number 4 all season long, where it's never in winning contention, but it's always in there pretty safely for a nomination.
Scorsese also does do quite well in this category. We saw The Irishman get in here. Silence, the only nomination that film got was in cinematography, and he won in 2011 for Hugo. Martin Scorsese didn't win, but his cinematographer on that film did win. You understand what I'm saying. Killers of the Flower Moon feels really, really strong here. I think that this film's going to get 10 to 12 nominations, and I don't think that cinematography is one that it's really vulnerable to miss.
The last few years, we've been screaming for Hoyt van Hoytema to be nominated in cinematography, and he continues not to get in. Last year with Nope, and this year, I think maybe comes his time with Oppenheimer. The capturing of the atomic bomb is probably going to be very revolutionary. It's going to be very different. We've never really seen someone shoot a live explosion to this magnitude, so I feel like he could capture this in a very interesting, a very dynamic angle. If this movie is an Academy favorite, where it is in picture, it is in some more above-the-line categories, cinematography feels pretty safe to come along. We know that Hoyt has a very interesting relationship with the Academy. Getting into this category, he's missed for his last few. I think he has at least 1 nomination, right?
He did get the nomination for Dunkirk.
Cool, I was right.
And Oppenheimer looks similar to that. This looks beautifully shot, and it's not doing anything wild. It's just a very well-shot period piece. It makes sense why he missed for Tenet. It doesn't make sense why he missed for Interstellar. He should have been there for Nope. But I guess it makes sense in a way why that film blanked out at the Oscars. But with Oppenheimer, this also has the benefit of being one of the few films we've seen footage from. And we know this looks gorgeous, and it looks like an Academy Award nominee.
Number 5, though, I have to give you credit here. When I made my initial list, I don't know why, I just blanked on this movie. It wasn't in my 10. The revolutionary or very different types of cinematography choices that are being used with the Zone of Interest, a movie I know that you're very high on. I may not be there with you in every category, but cinematography, a 360 camera, if that is real, could be something that is its like stick to get into this category. If you have an interesting angle like this, you can easily manage your way into a lineup of 5.
And the cinematographer of this film has been nominated twice in the past for international films. So honestly, with this one looking like it has a bigger profile than Ida, than Cold War, this feels really possible. It's not in black and white, which those films were, which is always catnip for the Academy. I really like your top 5. I think I have 4 of the same 5 as you, but I still have Poor Things in my top 5. Reason that I still have Poor Things is that I think this film, no matter how controversial it is, we've seen images, we know it looks beautiful. Robbie Ryan is shooting it, he's great at what he does. Plus, there seems to be a really interesting use of color here. It jumps from black and white to very, very bold pastel colors with pinks and yellows, and even if this film is incredibly mixed, the cinematography branch could still go for it like they did with Bardo.
I disagree a little bit. I think that the majority of the still images that we got looked very dull. So to me, it went from my number 5 to my number 10, 11 spot, and the release date of the September 1st weekend does not look very good. Bardo at least had a November, December release and was being heavily pushed for a long time. I don't know what Poor Things is looking like. Looking at the rest of my top 10, I'm kind of going to blow through the rest of these just because they have a small little angle, but nothing big enough to put in the top 5, obviously. Barbie's at 6. We've seen a trailer. It looks great. Just Warner Brothers are going to get 3 of the 5 nominees? Probably not. May December could be. It could pull a Tar type nomination, but that was a surprise. Not many people were predicting Tar at that moment, so I'm there as well. El Conde, are they going to put 2 international movies in the top 5? Probably not. Maestro, black and white movie. We know they love these, but is Maestro big enough? Sometimes it hasn't mattered in the past because Cold War wasn't really a major contender, and it still got in. And at number 10, I do have The Killer, David Fincher. He always does interesting stuff with his cameras. Just, can he get this movie that doesn't seem as big as his last few into a cinematography nomination? Maybe this is our wild out of left field nomination this year in this category, but again, we can't really predict those because if we did, they're not really that wild.
I like what you said about all of those right there. I'm still not sure if Maestro's black and white or not, but if it is, then that gives it a solid chance because it's been a few years since we've had black and white movie in cinematography, and they love that shit. Now, I know Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2 both have sections in black and white, so maybe that'll help those 2 films.
Probably.
But some ones that I think you're missing in your top 10, the first one would be Nyad, which is being shot by Claudio Miranda, who of course was snubbed last year for Top Gun Maverick, but that said, being snubbed one year doesn't mean being snubbed the next year. This film is going to look gorgeous. We've seen what Claudio Miranda has done with ocean photography in the past with Life of Pi, so that makes me feel very positive about Nyad. Also, I think you're missing Asteroid City. I know we're both not as high on Asteroid City as some other people might be, but that said, The French Dispatch was probably number 7, number 8 for Best Cinematography, despite being an anthology film, and despite the fact that the film wasn't really well loved. Now, if Asteroid City gets great reviews, then the cinematography is very possible. And finally, Firebrand, which I know you're going to be happy to hear this, but the photos that we've seen from it so far are gorgeous. Gorgeous. I would maybe not have it in your top 10, but maybe put it a little bit close to the top 10 for cinematography.
I'm being a little bit more reserved with Firebrand. I know it's one I want to see do well, but also going to wait to put into some more categories until those camera reactions that do come out in about a month. So I don't have to wait long to move it into some categories. Asteroid City, yeah, maybe it should be in my top 10, but again, as we talked about last time, I'm not really going to put this anywhere until it's actually in the race, because I don't think it's going to be nominated.
Now let's move over to Best Sound. We're going to couple Best Sound and Best Editing back to back. The first one is Sound. At number 1, I got Dune Part 2. We saw the trailer. We heard those booming sounds. It's going to be big. I think it's one of the ways that this film might actually be better than the first one. I think the editing has an opportunity to be absolutely insanely well put together. At number 2 in Best Sound, The Color Purple, which I think is completely safe for a nomination in sound. That's risky to say, but it's a musical. It's a musical. It's going to have good sound design, and it will probably also be in editing. And number 3, I have Oppenheimer. We know that the sound is going to be loud in this movie, but of course, Christopher Nolan could overdo it again. And if he overdoes it, then womp womp. Sorry, Oppenheimer, you are out of the sound category. But for now, just based on what we know about the sound effects that are going to be in this, the explosions, the loudness of all of that, and how it's all mixed together, I think that's it's a pretty strong bet for a nomination, unless Christopher Nolan makes a bit of a fucky-wucky again, messes it all up.
This is the same sound, a lead sound editor as Tenet, so take that as you will, but Oppenheimer, from what we've seen, it looks like it's going to be more grounded.
It does look that way, but we're going to know in a few months if Christopher Nolan went way overboard. I don't blame his sound designer. I blame him. This has been a problem for years. Ever since Interstellar, it's been a problem. Actually, ever since The Dark Knight Rises, it's been a problem where he emphasizes feeling and emphasizes music rather than emphasizing having dialogue that people can hear and understand. All Christopher Nolan movies should be screened with subtitles. That's what I believe. Best Sound, number 4, I have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I think this is going to be one of the blockbuster picks in the category. Of course, I have 3 blockbusters in here right now, but I think that this one feels pretty promising for a sound nomination. It's going to have a lot of great effects throughout. Now, this one could be dropped if something more prestige comes into the category, like number 5, Killers of the Flower Moon, which is something more prestigious. This one, I think, is going to have some great sound of wind across the plains. It reminds me a lot of The Power of the Dog in terms of the sound nomination that film got, which this film could also get. But this one's also going to have a lot of potential for some loud effects mixed in with the slowness and the meditative sounds of wind going across the Oklahoma plains. So that's my top 5, and I feel pretty good about it at this point. I don't feel very strong outside of the top 5 here, because at number 6, I have The Killer. I don't have this performing extremely well with the Oscars, but, it's David Fincher, and his sound typically does quite well with the Academy Awards. Then I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This one's premiered this week. The reviews are good, but not as great as they need to be in the conversation. But that said, the reason I have this here is that always we get one Marvel movie in the sound shortlist. They never get nominated, but they're always there in the shortlist, which means it's number 7. It's safe to be shortlisted, but it is not safe to be nominated. Then Ferrari. Ferrari goes vroom vroom, but film might be bad. So that is why I have it low. If it's good, it will likely be number 6 or number 5. Then I have Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Mission Impossible has never gotten a single Oscar nomination. I don't see why it would start now, but it's worth mentioning because from everything we've seen, it just booms out of those IMAX speakers, and I can't wait to see it. And finally, The Flash, number 10, should be a financial hit. And if it's a financial hit and a critical hit, which it looks like it's going to be, then it could make the shortlist here for sound. I don't know if I see it getting nominated, but it's possible. Also, just throwing some stuff out there. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is animated. Sometimes they love that. The Creator is a giant sci-fi movie with Greg Fraser shooting it. It got great reviews from CinemaCon. I don't know about the sound of this one, but it's worth mentioning here. Then there's John Wick Chapter 4, which has a lot of gunshots and a lot of bones cracking as people hit each other. I think sound is probably one of the best bets for John Wick Chapter 4. There's also Napoleon, there's also Wonka, and there's also Priscilla to round out some of the ones that are just on the periphery here, but I'm not feeling confident about any of those. Really, the only ones I feel confident about are my top 3.
Come on, dude. You mentioned Ferrari, but you don't mention Gran Turismo? Like, the real racing movie of the year.
Oh, actually, that is worth mentioning. That
I
totally
was
is
being
worth
sarcastic.
mentioning. No, it's worth mentioning. It's not going to happen, but it's Niall Blomkamp doing it. It's going to have very loud sound. If this is a financial hit, maybe it's possible. And it's possible with Niall Blomkamp behind it. I mean, he's had some real stinkers come out since
This
District
will be a stinker.
9. It's worth considering, but it's not worth putting in the top 10.
Speaking of Vroom Vroom movies, we go over to Best Editing, and I don't have a Vroom Vroom in my top 5, but Ferrari, it is at number 6. Like Matt just said, this movie could be great, this movie could be bad. We don't know, and until we know, it's not in, but if it is good, it is in. But for our real top 5 here, Oppenheimer, it's my number 1. As I alluded to over in Best Sound, I am pairing these together, sound and editing. There is the chance for Nolan to go overboard, but also, this kind of seems like the movie where you probably should go overboard because it is an atomic bomb. It should be ear-shattering. It should be in your face, but also the rest of the movie probably be more level where you can hear the dialogue. It's not intense action sequences. It's more grounded stuff. It's debates. In those scenes, you're going to be able to hear Murphy. You're going to be able to hear the rest of this ensemble cast, all-star cast, speak and do their stuff. But when it's supposed to hit, the sound will hit. And I think that will carry over into editing as well. Over in number 2 is where I do have Dune Part 2. This is a category where probably on paper it probably should win, but is Dune Part 2 going to win everything the first one wins? Probably not, and I feel like this is where it could slide off of that number 1 podium. Color Purple is here as well. It has a great chance to win, but also I think this movie needs to be a Best Picture winner contender to win. I know you have it as that. I'm not there yet. So to me, it's here at number 3 for a nomination, but it's not yet into that top 2 for a chance to win. Past Lives, a movie I feel like is very strong in Best Picture, is in here at number 4 for Best Editing, because we know that usually I would say 3 of your top 5 Best Picture nominees are in the editing category. Past Lives being either my number 1 or my number 2 right now, kind of needs to be here. And at number 5, I do have Killers of the Flower Moon. This seems like the one that definitely should miss. I'm just not really sure what to pull to put into its spot at the moment.
I have Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2 swapped. I think they both have the same arguments for why they could win. And the only reason why I have Dune besting Oppenheimer here is because I don't think Oppenheimer will end up being a Best Picture nominee, whereas I do think Dune will. The same argument for both of them is they have a lot of format switching. They're both going to be cutting from black and white to color at some point in the film. They're also both going to be cutting between timelines, between locations a lot. Oppenheimer cuts back and forth through time, and Dune will cut back and forth across planets. And both of those make them seem very strong in editing. Otherwise, I also have The Color Purple. I also have Killers of the Flower Moon. I do not think that I have Past Lives, but I might have it in. So I agree with your top 5. I think it's a very good top 5.
After that, I do have The Killer at number 7. While it may not have as much vroom vroom action, we know that Fassbender will be on a bike for a good amount of the time, and that could count, right? Holdovers is at number 8. May December is at number 9. Zone of Interest is at number 10. These are other Best Picture hopefuls that are in my upper area of Best Picture that could carry over here. May December is not in my 10 at the moment, but after Cannes, I think it's rave reactions. It's right back up into my top 5. Editing could see a Tar-like package where it's picture, actress, editing, cinematography, and then you include supporting actor, maybe supporting actress, and a director. That's a pretty good package for May December. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm right on the cusp. Poor Things, Dump Money were stuff in my lineup last time. They've fallen down at the moment, but I could see the angle for both of them coming back into the conversation.
I would also recommend considering, maybe not putting it in your top 10, but considering Air, which we know has very strong editing. It probably won't be strong enough to make it in, but if there's some big shockers, and if we want to see Air get a bigger package in order to get that Best Picture nomination, editing would be possible. It's not 100% likely, but it's definitely possible, and it's worth considering. The other thing would be Next Goal Wins. Now, Next Goal Wins has been a film we've been writing off for 2 years now. We've constantly been saying, this is not happening. Next Goal Wins is not happening. It's not happening. But looky, it has a November release date, a Pride Award season release date. And guess what doesn't? Poor Things. So what is Searchlight prioritizing? They're prioritizing Next Goal Wins, which means we're taking back everything we've said about it. This could be a big contender. It's also worth mentioning that Jojo Rabbit got an editing nomination just a few years ago for Taika Waititi's kind of wacky, kind of fun, kind of unique style.
Yeah, I fully agree. Both those movies were probably in my 15. They're just not into the 10 yet. I do believe, as Matt just mentioned, Next Goal Wins is now Searchlight's main push. It's definitely getting a TIFF push. With that being said, it's probably placing top 3, maybe not number 1, but like number 3 at TIFF. Air, I do agree. We've seen it. It looks good. Just, I don't think it looks good enough. And with that being said, just like my Wes Anderson Asteroid City argument, I don't really see it in this category, so I'm not putting in the 10. But, once we get into, like, November, it's definitely going to be in my 10. It's just never in my 5. Air, I don't really see that unless a lot of the stuff above just falls on its face.
Now, let's move over to Best Visual Effects, where at number 1, I have, Dune Part 2. I think this is the one thing where we can just wrap up the category now, the same way that at the beginning of last year, we could just say, Avatar, you get it. It's yours, Avatar. Here you go. We don't need to see the movie. Don't show us the movie. Just take the award. Dune is the same level of this is just winning. There's nothing else that can come close. Because number 2 is Oppenheimer, which the only visual effects in this are bombs going boom. That's not big visual effects. There's not a lot in here. There's an argument even that Oppenheimer could miss Best Visual Effects. So number 3, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This movie has just come out in theaters. We have not seen it yet. We will be seeing it next week and talking about it next week. But everything I've heard says that the visual effects in this are the best in the series so far, the best in any of the Guardians movies. Every year, without fail, there's always a Marvel movie in. Now, will it be this? Will it be the Marvels? I would say this is more likely, which is why the Marvels is just sitting outside of my top 5. Then I have at number 4, a little bit of a wild card. I have The Creator at number 4. I don't know much about this film, but Greg Fraser is shooting it. It is a sci-fi fantasy movie that screened little bits at CinemaCon, apparently to rave reactions. Makes me feel like this is a visual effects contender for sure. And at number 5, I have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. This one just seems safe. It's going to be a big movie. It's going to maybe not have enormous visual effects, but it's going to have enough to be noteworthy within this category and to probably land it on the shortlist and probably get it a nomination.
I feel very confident saying 4 of your top 5 are locks. Yes, we're in May, but hey, Dune Part 2, it's winning. Oppenheimer, yeah, it could miss, but you don't need to have the most visual effects to get in here. If you deliver on your promise, you can get in. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, MCU, they always have one. This is our one. Indiana Jones, same thing as Oppenheimer. It's on the coast, Top Gun Maverick style. That leads us to our number 5 for me, which to me, it's one that you have out. Creator could be it, but also, at least if I understand right, they showed a trailer, and the trailer didn't show much, just like an overall premise. I could be wrong here, but I don't know. I feel like it definitely probably would be shortlisted. I just don't know how much of a push it's going to get. While I think one movie you have out is going to get that push.
Well, let me guess. It's The Little Mermaid. And my reason for not having The Little Mermaid in my top 5 is despite the fact that we've seen the Academy fall for this stuff in the past with The Lion King, with The Jungle Book, the fish in The Little Mermaid look absolutely like nightmare fuel. Personally, I have nothing against this film, but I think that the backlash against this will get to them. I think that might push it out of the top 5. That's why I have it below. I would also say that The Flash is worth mentioning. It's getting really good reviews, but that said, none of the zaddy Zack Snyder verse movies have made it in. If we haven't seen any of those make it in, not even Wonder Woman, then, I also think it's worth mentioning Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves as a potential shortlist. We've seen it. The visual effects are great. Barbie, maybe that could be a contender, but I don't think it would get nominated for this. As well, you can't discount The Killer. David Fincher has gotten shortlisted in the past. He always uses a lot of visual effects in his movies. It's very interesting. Wonka as well. And of course, Netflix's Adam Sandler vehicle, Spaceman, might not be very good, but I'm sure the visual effects will be worth taking note of.
I think visual effects this year will be a very straightforward category where, as I mentioned before, 4 seem pretty good. And it's just, what is number 5? Is it Marvel's? Is it The Creator? Is it Little Mermaid? Is it The Flash? Is it something completely else? That's where I think more of the guessing game's going to come this year, other than, hey, what's the 5? Kind of like how I think last year was as well, where we kind of knew, yeah, we had a scare at one point, like, oh, is Black Panther missing? But at the end of the day, 3 or 4 of our category was pretty like knowledgeable throughout the whole year.
My big prediction here is I think when Oppenheimer premieres, people are going to start saying there's not enough visual effects for this to get in. Kind of the way that we did with Top Gun Maverick last year, where for a very long time we just said that there wasn't enough for it to get in, and then it got in anyways. So maybe that's the same thing that happens this year, and Oppenheimer, people think it won't get in, and then it does. Or maybe it actually just doesn't.
But for everyone out there, let us know down below how many nominations and how many wins do you think Dune Part 2 is getting? Do you think it's sweeping the Tech Awards this time around? Or do you think, like Matt and I, it's going to have a little bit of a drop off? But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.